We're going to get started. If you need to get up and use the washroom, they're just out the door to the left. Fire exits are all marked. There's one actually just outside this door, there's one behind me, and then the main entrance by the lobby. Lunch will be served today. There will be breakfast tomorrow. It'll start just before 8. And the smoking lounge is out any exit to the outside. We have a full day today. First of all, I want to acknowledge that we're guests on the traditional territories of the Fort William First Nation, and we are here with great respect and hope that they understand that we will treat our time here with each other with respect and listen and make sure that we don't talk over each other at any time. We're here talking about the 3 roads. I recognize an awful lot of people from previous gatherings, so we're getting to know each other, which is great. We're here to listen, and we hope that you have some good suggestions for us as to how we can move this Indigenous-led project forward in a good way. This is one of, if you take the 3 roads together, this is one of the largest Indigenous-led projects in the country, and we should all be very proud to be part of it. But being an Indigenous-led project means that we have to move forward in a good way. We have to take guidance from our working group participants, from community members, elders, and people who can make sure that this project is conducted in a way that everybody will be proud of. There's a lot of things we have to work on, and that's really what we're here to talk about. You know, how do we mitigate any potential effects? How do we make sure people are not upset about potential issues that could come up with the road, either through construction or operation? And all of that good stuff is why we're gathered here today. It's an interesting lineup. We're going to have breakout rooms today. Most of the people who've been at previous sessions know what we do. You sign up outside as a community, and they'll tell you exactly where you should be at a certain time, okay? They'll do all of the organization of the logistics to make sure that different communities get into different breakout rooms and that nobody's left behind. There's going to be a couple, 3 short presentations just to get people who aren't maybe as familiar with the projects up to speed just after we do our introductions. My name is Steve Lindley. I am your acting MC. I found out 15 minutes ago that I was going to be your acting MC. The real MC, we ran into contractual problems based on the inclement weather, and then the plane on its back at Pearson was pretty much the nail in the coffin. Plus, we didn't have the $500,000 for the appearance fee. So this is what you get on a tight budget. Anything you need, you can come and see me at any time. I'm highly recognizable. I'm the tall guy with jet black hair. And I'll make sure that I put you in touch and know what they're talking about. There's many, many representatives of the project team in the room, and you probably know those people who have been at the forums before will know them and recognize them. We have a lot of smart people. We have even technical specialists here with us today. We have wildlife biologists, we have ecologists, earth and environment people, project managers, we have experts in Aboriginal treaty rights and interests, impacts assessment, and socioeconomic analysis, and of course consultation specialists. There's probably more. And then there's people like me that really don't have any expertise in anything. So you can come to me anyway. I mean, I'll do everything I can to tell you whatever you think you might want to hear. So we're going to kick this off with a welcome from our elder, Bob Baxter, from Martin Falls First Nation. Oh, there you are. You want to come on up? Thanks.
Yeah, good morning. There's supposed to be another elder that's supposed to do the opening, so I'm acting too, so. That was the second choice. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you here to this gathering, and that everything goes well, that the information is passed around in a good way. As I was coming in this morning, I was thinking of all the people that are traveling, coming to this meeting, that they travel safely, and and their families are safe, the ones that they leave behind. And it's always an honor for me to open a gathering like this, because I like to consider myself a traditional native person. I practice the old ways. And when I pray in my own language. But when I pray for the day in itself. The things that we take for granted, like today, and that there are special gifts out there. Sometimes we overlook. And as I was coming in this morning, I just when I speak to the Creator, I do it anywhere. Sometimes I go by the lake here in Lake Superior, or if I have it takes me about half an hour to get over here, so I pray in my truck. And that's what I did this morning, that we all, that the Creator gives us that direction for each and every one of us on the work that we do, that we do that work in a good way, as what people expect of us, especially the First Nations. The First Nations really value their traditional lands, that we are part of those lands from time immemorial. And we always pray to the Creator for the things that we see, for the earth itself, and what this earth gives us, provides us, so we can enjoy this land that the Creator gave us. I always hear sometimes people saying that, it's a hard life, getting up to work, and you struggle out of bed and you think of what you got to do for the day, and the hardships that we face. Myself, I like to think positive, and just think positive that I get up every morning. Kind of push my wife out of bed to go make tea or something. So I stretch over, and things like that, like things, there's little moments of what we take for granted. We were talking about pets this morning, and how the pets enjoy, the unconditional love, pets to their owners and stuff like that. And that's the way we should be too with each other, because we come from all different areas, and we do different work, but we always try and gain the same, the same finish or the product or whatever we do, and that we do it, and all these things are done in a good way. So I'm going to pray in a Ojibwe, and it's just to thank the Creator for that day and all the things that He has given us, that He provides direction for us for this day. If you can all stand up, please, those that can stand up. Gisema nito. Kinana ko migo ga gisigak minoa. Migo che ni guon. Wen mat sunan ga min shang. Wen wio nan. The chakanan. Migo chikena gon wettiga on denamang. Kanju bagitan man wettigi wettinang wette. Wa banong wette shawanang gapiano. Wettiga ispemeng umake aking. Miigwes kitenigo. So en misnam, werk je moeite aan met maten zo nanga kiezika. Koyak je nog kikat man, koyak nog kiun gamini goang je tot man. Koyak je maar mo biang, je bisen dat yang, je nemen nog sege go no werk aan is niet gaan schamer. Werk ik tot je gaat tek. We mich kanan gaat, dat is je gaat tegen. We koyak je tot je gaat tek, sam kan sam. Chima jibichiga tegwa ke koyake goche chinaga tenda gok. Mieshika goche miguan gijamanito. Migache.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your good words and for your prayer, setting us up in a good way. Much appreciated on a last-minute request. I forgot to mention something very important. We actually have gifts. There's going to be a draw at the end of the session tomorrow afternoon around 4 o'clock. We have two $500 cash awards. One is for filling out your passport, and if you don't know what the passport is, talk to the people at the front desk, at the registration desk. Basically, these are related to your visits to the forum, where the, what do you call them, the display boards for each project are set up. I think they're located on the second floor. Is that right? Oh, they're here? Okay, they're going to be here. There will be somebody at each of those displays. There's one for each of the three projects, and they'll be able to help answer questions or direct you to somebody that might be able to answer your question. And they will stamp your passport. So you pretty much have to visit all three displays and interact. Is there 5? See? That's what you get when you're acting. However many there are, you'll figure it out because you're going to want to be eligible for the draw. So we'll leave that onus on you. We also encourage people to fill out their workbook and again, talk to the people at registration. So there's going to be 2 draws, one for passport, it has to be full, and you have to be present when the draw happens. The second draw is going to be for the workbook. So fill in a workbook, you're eligible for one draw, get your passport filled, you're eligible for another draw. Make sense? There's people who know more about this than I do, so talk to them if there's any confusion. But that all happens tomorrow afternoon, so you have to be here to be able to win. Okay, I think we can probably get rolling here. We're going to start with some project overviews. And I believe the first project overview will be given by Kazim Sadiq on the Martin Falls Community Access Road. Kazim is the principal at Suslop and is on the project team lead for MFCAR and NRL. So I'll welcome Kazim to the stage. And Kazim, just a reminder that when you want your slide advanced, just let the guys know.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Beautiful day out there. A little chilly, but delighted to see that everyone was able to make it. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning. Great to see so many familiar faces, so many people that we've had the opportunity to engage with, interact with, learn from, and discuss the project with. So today is a day in the making for the past 6-7 years almost for us to be able to say it's here. The draft report is ready. So this presentation, the little bit of a few minutes that I'm going to take are just to sort of describe what exactly is it that becomes available for the community access road, what the review process is, and where do we go from here, and what the rest of the day is about as well. That is more about sort of conversations between the project and all of you around what the reports say, what your interests and concerns are, how we can potentially support the review of the draft, and what the process looks like. So I'll start with a brief presentation. If we can go on to the next slide. Just like to introduce some of the team members, project team members related to the Community Access Road, starting with Bob Baxter. Bob's going to join me shortly as part of the presentation. He is a member of Martin Falls Council and a senior community member advisor. He's joined by Lawrence Baxter at the front of the hall here, who's our senior community member advisor. We're also joined by Rowena Muniz at the back, who is Martin Falls Community Coordinator working with us on the project. Next slide, please. Then you get me. Steve's already introduced me, so I'll skip over. We're also joined by Jennifer Bruin at the front, who's our technical advisor, technical EA lead. She will be participating in the conversations in the breakout room later today. And then we're joined by the entire AECOM team as represented by Ingrid. Ingrid, unfortunately, is stuck with the kerfuffle with travel that Steve was talking about. She's one of the people caught in that. So she will be here shortly, but her and the rest of the technical team are going to be present at the event as well. Next slide, please. So I've already talked about what am I going to present. So I'll talk a little bit about the project, the preferred route, what to expect with this draft, the studies that you can expect to see, the draft reports of the studies of the different various valued components. I'll speak to those, what they are. And then the fact that we want to hear from you and how can we continue this conversation. This is a great opportunity to start the conversation, continue the conversation if we've been having it, but also talk a little bit about how do we work over the next few months, because this is an iterative process. It's not a few weeks. The initial review period is 120 days for Indigenous communities, but the conversation continues till the final draft is out. So we'll talk about that as well. And then where do we go from here? Next steps. Next slide, please. Okay. Bob, can I pass this slide over to you to describe what the Community Access Road is?
Okay. Take off my elder hat, back to work. As far as I can remember, Martin Falls has always wanted from the direction of the people, leadership has always worked on trying to get an all-season access road from Martin Falls to the existing highway down south towards our land, the Keena area. And it must at least be 30, 40 years since I've heard that, I know at one time Chief Sonny Garnier and at that time Chief Eli Muniz were going to go ahead and just go on their own as community to community, go meet each other halfway to make some kind of a road to come out of so they could use it all year round, just like a rough logging road. I remember Sonny talking about that a long time ago. And of course, Eli Muniz. And, you have to live in a community that's a remote to understand the hardships that these people, like our membership, face. I always, when I talk, I always say, that freedom that we have here, You know, in the cities where the road connections are, we can just jump in our vehicles and away we go to whatever destination we want to go to. But in Martin Falls and other remote communities, you can't do that. The days of when I was young, we used to travel all over the place. I remember traveling by snow machine from Fort Hope to Big Trout Lake, you know, just for recreation. But I find and trapping too, but I find that trapping is not there like it used to be. The young people don't seem to have that incentive, or it's not feasible anymore to make a living. So they have to come out here and look for you know, jobs and stuff like that to survive. When you're in a remote area, I find it myself very difficult when I go up there now, even though I lived up there and experienced that life. I still find it difficult today when I go to Martin Falls. And because of weather or whatever, airplane mechanical failures, we can't come out. And it's frustrating. And that freedom of movement is not there. There's one reserve I always mention that was a remote access, had a remote I mean, it was remote and it didn't have access. And once they got that road through, I was talking to one of the members, and and he told me that, you know what, I asked him, how did you find it once you got the road open? Aside from the negative, positive. One of the positives that he said was that when the people finally had that freedom to move out of that First Nations whenever they want, they saw the mental state of people went down, because now they could travel if they wanted to get out of the community. And I think that would be a huge benefit for our community too, because I see how excited they are once we get our winter road open just a couple days ago in light traffic, and I can see how excited they are to come out. You know, pick up their groceries, whatever it is they have to pick up, furniture. I got one of my grandsons came out of Fort Hope, and he's got a whole load of furniture in my garage there that he wants to take back, plus my trailer. Anyway, and the other thing is the health issues. You know, we got a lot of elders, we got all kinds of sickness that we have in the First Nations, and we depend on these, the only things we depend on is aircraft to come out of there. So that's why it's so beneficial for us anyway. That's why we want the road that's why we're trying to get that road to Martin Falls, you know, just for the well-being of our community as a whole. And of course, this road that we're going to be building, you know, it's going to be about 190 kilometers of two-lane gravel. And of course, along the way, that you know, we're going to rely on the quarries, the borough areas, and aggregate sources, all those things that we have to look at, and the bridges for the rivers, culverts for the streams, and stuff like that. Also, the temporary camps that's going to go along the way in building this road. If you travel from here to Nipigon, that road under construction, I always picture that's what that road's going to look like, because once we start construction up to Martin Falls, all that work and all the heavy equipment that's going to go through. and that's where I think a lot of First Nations sometimes feel that the land's going to be desecrated in some way, and that the land's going to be disturbed, the rivers are going to be disturbed, the animals, wildlife, fowl. Of course, everything's going to be disturbed. But I think with the work that we've done through consultants and all the hard work they have done on researches and from previous route makings, construction, I think we're trying to find the best practices and to minimize the damage, if you will, that will be done to the land moving forward. And I'll leave it at that. Miguel.
Miigwech, Bob. So I think Bob's really described the essence of what we've tried to do. And I'll just continue to describe how we've done it and what the review process looks like. If we can have the slide up on the screen to go along with that. Thank you. So we are, as you're aware, conducting an environmental assessment and an impact assessment process. So that's the provincial EA and the federal IA. This process, as Bob described, in Martin Falls, from a planning perspective, from a community perspective, from a talking about the road perspective, has been ongoing for decades. But this very process, sitting like this at the community level, looking at options, drawing lines on a map, that process started in earnest in 2017. So just the document that you're looking at today, sort of that conversation in an organized manner started in 2017. So it's the culmination of 7-8 years that you see in that report. And as Bob described, not only does it describe the way we're doing things, but also the impacts that the road will have and how we plan on managing it, and what are the impacts that would be left that we can't manage or mitigate. What are those? What do they look like? And how do we account for those in the planning process as well? Next slide, please. So how did we select the preferred route that we selected? We came up with 5 different study areas when the environmental assessment and impact assessment was started. Those study areas were indigenous knowledge, water, land, people, and engineering. And all of those different study areas have a number of different technical reports or valued components within them. So when you talk about water, for example, which is very important both to Martin Falls and to neighboring communities and to the project overall, because of the potential impact, we are going to talk about fish, groundwater, peatlands, surface water. Those are 4 different reports that you can expect to see with the release of the draft. Next slide, please. So the preferred route was a route which was selected after many years, as Bob described, as I mentioned, through significant feedback from Martin Falls community members, through engagement with other communities like Arrowland First Nation, going back 10 years or so, with a number of other neighboring communities, and with many people in this room trying to get feedback on what this route looks like and what does that mean for them specifically. What do they like about it? What don't they like about it? And then, of course, all the technical studies and the engineering studies came to inform the preferred route. Finally, community feedback was received, which consolidated the decision to go with the route that we have chosen in this project. And a band council resolution was attained by the project team from Martin Falls to consolidate the choice of this preferred corridor. And that's what you see on this map here. Next slide, please. So the review process, it says, are you ready? I hope everyone is ready. It is a big undertaking. I've described all the time that we've taken to write the documents and to consult on them as we go. So in many ways, it's been a conversation over the years. But the findings in the report are going to land on people's desks or at the community hall for the first time. So they'll see those findings for the first time. And they are significant. The draft EAIS is almost 1,000 pages long. That's just the main document. The supporting studies are also numerous. We're talking about a number of large bankers' boxes. That's not to say that, this is intimidating. There is a lot of reading, absolutely. But we've also taken a number of steps to ensure that the information in those reports is communicated easily, it's digested easily, the essence of the reports is communicated well. And to do that, we have plain language assessment summaries as well. In addition to the draft reports, the consultation record with each community will become available to those communities as well. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline of the review process. I'll start there with the dates. If you want to focus on the dates, in November 24, we released Milestone 3 Progress Report, which described the consultation and engagement that would have taken place with the communities. If you are from one of the communities around the project, from one of the First Nations, you would have received this report as well. Then in February 2025, today, the draft EAIS is released to Indigenous communities for 120 days in total. And along with that, the draft record of consultation and engagement for interested persons is also released, which is just general members of the public. The first 60 of these 120 days are protected for Indigenous review only. So at that point, it's not available to the general public, it's only available to Indigenous communities, but then it continues to be available to Indigenous communities for a total of 120 days. And then in April, the draft EAIS becomes available both to regulators as well as to the general public for review, and it's only available to them for a total of 60 days. The review period comes to an end in June 2025, so around the same date as today in June, so somewhere around 18th, 19th of June is likely the last day of the review process. Now, because we would have been consulting all along that record of consultation, the compiled full cumulative record of consultation, if I can use that word, which is actually confusing, but just think of it as the combined record of consultation, that becomes available later on in the summer. And then we have an additional cumulative effects consultation report and the final record of consultation also coming out in fall and winter, because it continues to account for the activities that are taking place at that point. When we've had the time to really reflect on all the comments received, all the feedback received, we will make those changes into the draft report. And through that process, we'll get the final EAIS report, which is expected either in the fall of 2025 or winter of 2025-2026. The time is sort of a function of how much feedback we get. If we get a certain amount, it's probably the fall. If we get a remarkable amount of feedback, which we're really hoping for, then it's more likely to be winter 25-26. Next slide, please. So as I've talked about the fact the EAIS report's coming out, and it contains the results of all the fieldwork conducted between 2019 and 2023. So just the fieldwork itself is multi-year. It is from 29 to 23, depending on the discipline, but every single discipline reports on multiple seasons. In addition to the potential effects on that valued component that we talk about, we'll talk about the mitigation for those direct effects in those reports. We're hoping for feedback on our approach to mitigation as well, any additional ideas that you might have related to that mitigation. And then lastly, we'll also look at the potential cumulative effects that the project might cause in the region, in addition to the direct impacts of the project. Next slide, please. Okay, so initially in the presentation, I talked a little bit about the 5 different study areas. This slide talks about all the different technical reports that become available in those study areas, starting with Indigenous knowledge. Now, as an Indigenous proponent, this part's been very, very important for us, because the decision on what the preferred route is was significantly driven by Indigenous knowledge. It was also significantly driven by impact on people. So that's why the people section has a number of different reports in it. So examples are acoustic and vibration, cultural heritage, atmospheric greenhouse gases, community well-being, which is a consolidation of economic impact, human health and community safety. So those are examples of different reports that we call valued components. You'll have access to all of those different reports under these 5 study areas. Next slide, please. Now, of course, we would like to hear from you. That's the entire point of getting together. That's the reason we've all gathered. We definitely want to know if there are key areas of interest that matter more to you, that you're more interested in. Of course, as a project, as an entity that's trying to develop a road, we are impacting certain things more than other things. I think Bob described a lot of those sort of social and community level impacts, both positive and some negative, that we're going to feel with the road being developed. So that's an example of something which will be significantly impacted. And understandably, there would be a lot of feedback from people on those areas. Some other valued components, from our perspective, don't really get impacted all that much. And we'll talk about that if that's of interest as well. What we've done for the rest of the day is we've set up breakout sessions to be able to speak one-on-one with interested Indigenous communities about the project. So we are going to be around for the rest of today, for the rest of tomorrow. There are sign-up sheets. I believe they're outside. So if you haven't, please sign up for a slot, and we look forward to continuing this conversation with you, both one-on-one today, but also over the next 120 days. Next slide, please. So just to sort of sum it up, the draft review period is 120 days, starting from pretty much now. We're also planning on holding a public information center in Geraldton and Thunder Bay in the spring of 2025. It will be sort of for those of you who've attended this, you'll see the same information, but if any other questions come to mind, if you want to talk to technical experts about something and you see that as an opportunity, please come out and chat with us. And then we look forward to submitting the final EAIS in sort of fall, winter of this year. I think that's everything from us. Next slide, please. Even though we're all here in the room, you can find us, you can talk to us. If you want to make a note of how to get in touch with us, that's how you can. Thank you so much, Migovic. Look forward to continuing the conversation today.
Really great presentation. By the way, one of my jobs is to keep things on time track, but I'm going to blame everybody else if it doesn't stay that way. I mean, that's what I get being acting, right? You can't blame me for that, right? Somebody asked me just to hold up, this is what the workbook looks like. Remember we talked about the draw? And this is what the passport looks like. So if you're interested in being eligible for the draw, make sure that you have one or both of these. Okay, so we're going to move along now. We'll have a break after the next 2 presentations. Don's going to go lickety-split. It's going to be great. And we're going to hear all about the Webequie Supply Road. Don Parkinson, who's the Senior Consultation Specialist at Atkins Realis and has been working on the WSR project since its beginning, and even projects before WSR was even born. So, welcome.
I noticed how our acting MC is bearing no responsibility for his performance in any way whatsoever, so that's worked out nicely for you, Steve. So I'm just going to be fairly brief and run through, if we can bring the PowerPoint up on the screen here, run through a bit of a project update, tell you where we sit now. We're not basically that far off where the Martin Falls Community Access Road project is. And oh, there we are. So we're very close to where they are in terms of the report being released, but I'll get to that in a minute. So let's just give you some background, first of all, on the project in terms of the purpose of the road. The Webequie Supply Road is the northernmost of the 3 all-season road projects that are connected together, but are all separate and were initiated at different times for different reasons. The first purpose to moving materials and supplies from the Webequie Airport to the Ring of Fire area, providing local employment opportunities, economic development opportunities as well, obviously, and training opportunities and for youth to encourage them in getting additional skills, post-secondary education as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the actual project, this one is 107 kilometers planned length, running from the Webequie Airport to the McFalds Lake area, just east of the Mukotai River, if you know the area well. 17 kilometers actually sit on reserve lands, and the corridor width, the final corridor width or right-of-way would be 35 meters. Next slide, please. There are 6 major water body crossings, the largest one being that of the Winisk Lake, which is about 200 to 250 meters span, a very significant crossing, and then smaller bridges, Mukotai River, Winiskissis Channel, and a couple of 3 other ones as well. And as with all of these road projects, it's more than just the 2-lane road. There are both temporary and permanent infrastructure components to it, aggregate pits and rock quarry areas being one of those. And you'll see a little bit later on, there are 2 planned quarry areas along the route. And there's interesting facts about one of those as well too. 4 construction camps are planned along the length of the road at sort of essentially equal distances. And then there would be storage and laydown yards that are typically associated with the camp locations. These would be temporary, would be restored afterwards. Next slide, please. So this map, I know it's you can't see it very well, but we have hard copy versions of this, and we may have a larger version of it as well. We could walk you through this. So we've identified the preferred locations for the quarries, one of which sits mainly on reserve lands in the southeast corner there, little pink blob there in the southeast corner of Webequie's reserve lands, a very large reserve of or deposit of aggregate material or material that could be processed into aggregate. And then there's another one near Winiskissis Channel to the northeast of there. You can see the camp locations highlighted with the sort of gold, yellow colored labels as well too. So you can see they're sort of equally spaced out. Next slide, please. So in terms of the context, as I mentioned, the Webequie Supply Road is the northernmost of the 3 all-season roads, running from, again, the airport to the McFalds Lake area, where it would connect with the northern end of the planned Northern Road Link Road. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that people ask, and this slide was developed for community members in Webequie in particular, because they were asking questions about the regional assessment process, and I know this slide's a bit wordy, but basically it's a separate process being administered by the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and it may, it's certainly, we are contributing to it through the Webequie Supply Road project team. We are contributing to it, providing information to it. But again, it's a separate process. And any information, I mean, it has started a lot later than our environmental assessment or impact assessment has. So it may have some influence on our project, but they've just approved their terms of reference, so they're a lot further behind. Next slide, please. So we have, as you probably know, have been for the last close to 7 years, I believe, doing a lot of consultation in a lot of different ways. Obviously, we have our website where we have a lot of information, so much that we have to keep cleaning it up because there's just so much material and it just keeps piling up. A lot of notices being sent out. We've been open to meetings with community members anywhere at any time. So we've done a number of those. We'd like to do more of them. We always want to do more of them. We've been doing radio shows on Wabate Radio Network for the last 5 years, I would say, whose purpose has been to inform people about the project, but also inform them about the process, and hopefully by educating them, getting them involved in the process more. And we've noticed, I know in Webequie itself, the fruits of our labor of these efforts, I think we think anyway, we're getting a lot more really good questions from community members because they're aware of the process. We've gone through the process with them. So we're getting a lot of really good questions about where we are and a lot more detailed technical questions. So we feel pretty good about how that's paid off. And then we've done live streams as well too. So live internet broadcasts as well on various topics. Next slide, please. So we've heard a lot of different things we've had well over 1,000 comments, a lot of them during the terms of reference development process. So grouping them together, just some of the major themes that we've come across are, and this is out of scope for our project, but road ownership and policing. This has been a concern of community members, understandably. I worked on road projects previously in the same area, and that was probably the top concern. Security of the area. There's the cumulative effects concern, right? All the projects, past, present, and reasonably foreseeable together, and what those might be. Job opportunities, commercial opportunities. Downriver water quality is one that we've gotten mainly from the coastal communities in the receiving waters or near the receiving waters. Climate change, of course, is another big one. I know in Webequie talking about selling the gravel because the main pit or quarry sits on reserve land, selling the gravel to support the project. That's one that's been brought up. Treaty rights, of course, is a major one as well. And then concerns about drugs and alcohol, which tie in with the road ownership and policing. General security of the road. That's a bigger issue. I think it's starting to be dealt with at another level, but it's not really the focus of our work. Next slide, please. So where are we now in the project? Well, we're almost where Martin Falls Community Access Road is. We haven't quite released our giant document. I hazard to guess it might be a paid access road, maybe 1,001 pages. It'll be a big document. And what we're trying to do is, in parallel, we're going to release a plain language summary of it. So basically really boiling down that large document into the absolute key information that will help community members know where to look to get more information and help guide people to understand more about it, because those large documents are very intimidating. We have some other tools that we'll be talking about, I believe, with Tony during the next couple of days. Some other learning tools to help community members, again, follow the document and understand what's in the document. And as Qasim mentioned before, we'll be doing the same as they are with a 60-day review, early review by Indigenous communities, and then a public review by everyone, public stakeholders and Indigenous communities. And this report will identify and discuss potential effects of the project on the various VCs or valued components. Next slide, please. Slide, please. So in terms of the decision-making process, for those that aren't aware of it, in Ontario, this would get submitted, the environmental assessment report gets submitted, and then it eventually goes to the minister with, and then there's 3 different routes it can go. It can go approval, approve with conditions, or refuse to approve the project. And then at the Canadian level, at the federal level, it's an impact assessment report, which is prepared by IAC, or by Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, after they review our impact statement that we prepare for them. Then it goes to the minister, the governor, council, and then they make a decision themselves. And then Webequie has their own process in community to decide on whether they want to proceed with the project as well too. Next slide, please. So, after approval, I'm sure many of you know this, but the approval of the project doesn't mean all permits or all approvals have been given. There's many other approvals that have to be gained. There are many other permits to apply for, such as those to work near a water course, when you're building bridges, in water works like building piers, things like that, pits and quarries, things like that. And then we have the post-approval monitoring that goes on. So beyond the permits, there's monitoring by the project proponent to make sure that we meet the commitments. So there's compliance monitoring to make sure we meet the commitments that we made and that were asked of us by the regulatory agencies. And then there are our own commitments that we made in the process. And then there's the compliance monitoring or effects monitoring to look at whether our predictions as to what the potential effects might be are actually coming true or not coming true. Hopefully they're not coming true if they're negative impacts. So the point is that if there is an EA approval, that doesn't mean there's no more oversight. There's a significant amount of oversight after that. Next slide, please. I think I've covered this one. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, coming soon. Can't tell you exactly when. I know I have two people in the back of the room that are asking us almost daily when it's going to come, Jason and Paul, yes. And our document will be coming out very shortly. And again, it will be accompanied. We're not going to release it unless we have the plain language summary to accompany it to help follow the document as well. So, next slide, please. So here's the basic schedule. You can see what we're doing right now. The document's getting ready to be released. And then ultimately, we're hoping 2026 that we'll receive decisions from both the federal government and the provincial government on the project. So, that's it. No questions at this point, Steve? No questions? Okay.
An acting presenter. I just warn people who are coming up to the podium that there's loose wires down here at your feet. I don't want to see anybody toppling over. Next, we're going to have a presentation from Angela Brooks, who is the technical lead for Atkins Realis on the Northern Road Link. And then we'll have a break. If we have time, and we're doing pretty well on time right now, we might be able to take a few questions before the break. And then after the break, we're going to hear from our consultation engagement panel, and I'll introduce them when we actually get there. But for now, over to Ange to talk about the Northern Road Link.
All right, Tony, can I have the presentation up? Or who's ever doing it? Okay, great, thanks. So our project, the Northern Road Link, is not quite at the same stage as MFCAR and WSR. We're quite a few years behind. We're just finishing up all the baseline work at this point. So I just want to remind everybody, because everybody knows, it's a First Nations-led environmental assessment. Next slide, please. So what I want to talk about today is the study plans, the Attawapiskat River crossing, the alternatives assessment, a little blurb on cumulative effects, and then I'm going to have Michelle come up to talk about Indigenous knowledge and Aboriginal treaty rights and interests. If she's in the room, I texted her. I don't know where she's at, so hopefully she shows up in the next 10 minutes or so. All right, next slide. Okay, so most of you in this room are familiar with this project and have probably heard this presentation numerous times. So the NRL is a proposed all-season multi-purpose road. The proponents of the project are Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation. The road will connect the Ring of Fire mineral deposit to the all-season highway network via Martin Falls Community Access Road. And it will also provide an opportunity for Webequie First Nation to connect to the all-season highway network. Next slide, please. So this is just a little schematic of our project team. First of all, we have the Martin Falls and Webequie Chief and Council at the top as it's community-led. We also have what we call the working group, which is members of Martin Falls and Webequie. Some of them are in the room today. We have Lawrence Baxter, Alana Downey-Baxter from Martin Falls, Roy Spence and Gordon Wabass from Webequie First Nation. Our project co-leads are Michael Fox and Qasim Sadiq, and then the rest of us just consultants that work on the project. Next slide. And here's a map, and I know you've also seen this map many times. It just shows a northern road link in relation to the Webequie Supply Road, which is at the north, and the Martin Falls Community Access Road, which is just south of NRL. Next slide. All right, so the study plans, and what are they? Well, study plans are a key component of the project, and they are required by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. And they were a part of the approval of our terms of reference. The purpose of the study plans is to outline the methods that we will use to assess the potential impacts of the project, of our various alternatives, it includes methods within these documents for how we collect the baseline information, how we analyze the data, our proposed predictive modeling of how we work with the data, and it also includes a section on the environmental effects assessment scoping. So these study plans have been prepared and shared with MECP for review. We've had numerous iterations and reviews going back and forth. We have study plan fact sheets available at the back. They're just a summary of the study plans. Those fact sheets are also available on the NRL website. We're looking for feedback on these fact sheets, so if you could avail yourselves and have a quick read of the fact sheets, we would appreciate it. You can also talk to anybody on the project about them if you have any questions. But like I said, we're looking for feedback. Next slide. Okay, so the other thing we wanted to talk about, and I know we've been discussing this for quite some time, are the alternate routes for crossing the Attawapiskat River. We have the east crossing, which is the one that's running up on the Esker, and we had two proposed westerly crossings. The furthest west crossing was one of the ones we were looking at towards the early stages of the project. We quickly changed our minds on that project after some engagement and consultation with the communities, because it was brought to our attention that there's sturgeon spawning areas in that location. So we shifted the location of the bridge to be slightly downstream and outside of any potential sturgeon spawning locations. The next slide, we will show how we shifted the eastern crossing slightly downstream to avoid the set of those three islands that are upstream of the crossing. And this was mostly done in consultation with Martin Falls community members who expressed concern about the proximity of the road crossing to those islands, which are an important moose concentration area. So we listened to the community, we talked to the engineers, and we shifted the crossing further downstream. Next slide. So here's a map of our alternative corridors. We've got 12 alternative corridor segments, or all the ones are in different colors. Each alternative is 2 kilometers wide. So that way we can move the alignment anywhere within that 2-kilometer corridor, because there'll be other sensitive reasons that we need to move it within the 2-kilometer corridor. It doesn't mean that it's going to go smack dab right in the center. Various segment combinations are possible to put together the full corridor. There are some common segments in the south, A1 and B1, and then same thing up in the north end. And I also just want to mention that at any point during the EA and IA process, we could be presented with other alternatives that we will have to incorporate into the project. So that's all to say that this isn't necessarily set in stone. We could end up with other corridor segments. That's just how the environmental assessment process works. Next slide. So here I want to talk about the alternatives assessment and how we're working on it. This slide is also a little bit wordy, but basically the alternatives assessment allows for a comparison of the advantages and disadvantages of each of the different segment options. We're using a computer software tool to help us work through this because there's mountains of data and it would take too long for people to process that data to come up with the results. We have indicators and criteria to help us figure out how we want to organize that data. And we're also looking for your feedback on this as well. We are looking for your opinion on the location of the corridor segments, whether you prefer it going up onto the Esker or over to the west through the peatlands. I also want to mention we have corridor segments south of the Attawapiskat River that are currently running through sensitive caribou habitat. I don't think I have a map here, but we do have a map that we will have on one of the, next to our booth, so I can show you that in more detail a little bit later. Next slide. So this is the method for how we're completing the alternatives assessment analysis. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to use my glasses for this one. All right, so we first gathered all of our data from the baseline studies. We assigned scoring and weighting to that, but I'll get into that a little bit later. We haven't applied weighting yet. Our experts have built a model and we've had initial output of that, but we're still waiting on a little bit more refinement of the data before we're ready to show you the results of that assessment. And then once we have the results, we'll have the evaluation outside of the model, which will include additional engagement and consultation, and then eventually selection of the preferred corridor. So you can see right now we're right kind of in that center portion. We have to rerun the data. We're just looking for more data inputs and more feedback from communities in order to complete another run of the data. Next slide. So some of the terms that we use in the alternatives assessment, it's a little bit technical. So we have a group of factors. You know, I think let's go to the next slide because it's easier to figure this out. So here's our factors and criteria. So for example, the factor, natural environment. So the criteria under that one is caribou, wolverine, birds, fish. If we look under Indigenous land use and interest, we have Indigenous land and resource use, and then sustenance and wildlife and waterfowl species. These are just examples. It's not exhaustive. And then the other factors are socioeconomic, technical considerations, that's the constructability and the cost, and then the physical environment, which is your surface water, groundwater, air, noise, greenhouse gas. Next slide. So this is the part where I talked about the weighting and scoring. We haven't applied weighting yet, but what that means is we will apply, not scoring, but you see those percentages, how right now each one of those factors is worth 20% in the assessment. We're going to work within those factors, and some of the factors will be worth more than other factors based on community feedback and subject matter experts' opinions, because they'll be more important, if you will, in the analysis than other factors. And then once we rerun all of the data and we rerun the model again, we'll come out with scoring, and it will eventually show us which alternative is coming up as the most preferred. Next slide. So this is just another example. I already talked about this, of our factors and criteria and the indicators, so we can just go on to the next slide. All right, so this is just a little blurb about cumulative effects assessment. I know we talked about this in great detail at the last time we gathered. So just as a summary, the cumulative effects assessment is a requirement of the federal and the provincial EA process. It's a requirement in the tailored impact statement guidelines and in our terms of reference. And what it is, it's a combined impact of multiple projects and activities over time and space. So we're looking at projects that are already on the go. So for example, NRL, we'll also be looking at MFCAR and WSR, but we'll also be looking at projects within the wider geographic area. So it could be existing mines, future mines, other roads. I'm sure I'm missing some. We also have a table map of this that you can have a look at, all of the projects that we have listed that we have to assess in the cumulative effects assessment. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is we take the net effects, which are the leftover effects, after we've applied mitigation, and we look at how it will interact, like I said, with other present, past, and future projects within the region to assess the effects when all of these are combined together. It's very confusing, it's very technical, and part of this process is to identify additional mitigation measures that can be applied to eliminate or reduce these cumulative effects. Well, sorry, what's left over after that is the cumulative effects. I urge you all to come and ask us about it. It's a lot easier to talk about it one-on-one instead of in a slide situation like this, because there's just so much to talk about. So I absolutely urge you to come and talk to the project team members, anybody on any project, because we're all doing the same effects assessment. Next slide. And this part I will hand over to Michelle.
Chimekwich and Buzu, welcome. Hi, my name is Michelle. I am leading the Indigenous Knowledge Program, which is an innovative process that we're doing for the Northern Road Link project. I'm also going to be supporting the work that we're doing on the Aboriginal and Treaty Rights and Interests assessment that we're doing with communities, and I invite you to attend our panel that we're hosting tomorrow that I'll be a part of, and discussing the process further. Could I get the next slide on screen, please? Thank you. So as part of our process of understanding potential positive and negative impacts of the proposed Northern Road Link project, what we're undertaking here is gathering or asking communities to share their Indigenous knowledge through what we're calling the Indigenous Knowledge Program. Here on this diagram, I want to show you is that to assess Aboriginal and or treaty rights and interests, we're asking communities to share their knowledge through two major aspects. One is existing knowledge base, so this would be existing Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous land and resource use studies that communities have undertaken already as part of their own work that they're doing for their communities. And we're also requesting that there is potentially desktop studies available that communities have participated in with other projects, and that would form our existing knowledge base that we can work with on the communities. What we're also doing, which is a bit more innovative with the Indigenous Knowledge Program, is undertaking project-specific studies. And here we ask communities to provide Indigenous knowledge that they would wish to share, community information they'd wish to share that's specific to our project. So we had previously, through communications, shared our study areas and where we're working with, and we're hoping communities can collaborate with us and share their Anishinaabe and Indigenous knowledge through our process so we can weave it into our assessment process. What we're also hoping to do, and we've seen that happen with some of the communities, is they're participating through our field programs. So we have community representatives who become field monitors when our field programs are ongoing during their field seasons, and that is also information that communities are willing to share with us and that we validate with our communities before we undertake them and include them in our baseline conditions. So baseline conditions is basically where we set the stage of how we assess the Northern Road Link project, specifically for, as noted up here, the Aboriginal and/or treaty rights and interest assessment. Next slide, please. So here, and I don't know if you can really read it, so I'm just going to point, and I might touch that screen as well, is while our Indigenous Knowledge Program is our critical information base, what we're asking for communities to do is participate through various means, but basically through our Indigenous Knowledge Program. And where we're at right now is we're asking communities to share their project-specific Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous land and resource use information that they're willing to share. So just to touch the screen, we're right here. There. We have copies of this presentation available back there, and I think we have some of this information also on our presentation booth, at our Expo booth with our presentation boards as well. So our goal, as I mentioned, is to weave together Indigenous knowledge throughout our project. And as part of our project schedule, this is what we're working with right now. And what we're hoping to do is have community uptake on our Indigenous knowledge program and share their information with us so it can form part of the baseline conditions. Next slide, please. So not only does Indigenous knowledge form our baseline conditions, because we are hoping to weave Indigenous knowledge throughout our project's valued components, and valued components are those factors or those conditions that we have to be mindful for that are related to land and water use. We are hoping to weave Indigenous knowledge throughout our various valued components. So for the disciplines that I work with, which is Aboriginal rights, Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, we are working with two valued components. They're up there in purple. That's the Indigenous use of land and resources and cultural continuity and well-being. But we have other valued components that are under various disciplines that also include Indigenous knowledge where available, where provided by communities, where available through desktop studies, that we are weaving that throughout the process of this impact assessment. And next slide, please. So our goal here is that Indigenous knowledge and Anishinaabe knowledge that's shared, it can be woven throughout our process, and not just in our baseline conditions, but where we're assessing the potential for impacts, positive and negative effects, that we can, communities can share information that we can use for this process. We also acknowledge that not only is it for the setting of the baseline conditions and the impact assessment, but also potentially information that can be shared and utilized through the project design aspects of this work as well. And lastly, one of our goals overall is essentially improving the awareness that communities have of the impacts of potential impacts of developments in their areas, and hoping to add to the broader knowledge base that communities are working through for this work. And on that note, thank you so much for having me up here talking to you about this. And as I noted, this afternoon, I will be back there at the booth for Northern Road Link, and please feel free to come up to me and chat more about this. And tomorrow I'd be on the panel for tomorrow morning for the HE discussion, and I'm happy to chat with you about that. Nikumi, thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you, ladies. Great presentation. All three real good presentations. Thanks to all the presenters, and thanks to the technical team that's staying up with this and keeping our audio and visual stuff rolling along. So Tony and your team, thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes. We can either break now, or we can take 5 minutes and just maybe a few questions. We're a little ahead of time, so I guess I can't take credit for being ahead of time if I'm not taking responsibility for being overtime. So I'll give that credit to the presenters for keeping us on track. Show of hands, break now or take a few questions and break after? Break now? Take a few questions now? Break now wins. So we'll, about 10 minutes, okay? And we'll be having a consultation and engagement panel right after the break.
Hello?
That's your 2-minute warning. We're going to have our consultation engagement panel up. So if we could get the representatives on the panel up in the front here, Kazim, Mike Fox. Mike's at the back working on other projects. Paging Kazim Sadiq. He was here and then he just drifted away. Okay. In the breakout rooms, so there will be. Paging Mike Fox. Mike Fox. Mr. Fogg. Don, can you see if he's out there? Mike. Okay. We now have the elusive Mike Fox joining us on the panel. We're going to start now, if you could take your seats. Order. Order in the courtroom. Thank you. So we're going to start with our consultation engagement panel. And this panel is going to be moderated by Jennifer Ashawasage. Pereira. And we have our panelists, Kazim Sadiq, who was previously introduced as principal of SUSLOP and project team member for NRL and MFCAR. And we have Mike Fox, who is principal of ICE, Indigenous Consulting Engagement, who is also project team member on NRL and is project team leader on Webequay Supply Road project. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a half an hour. Jennifer's going to walk us through some questions for our panelists, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions after that before we break for lunch. And I've been asked to remind people that if you want to ask a question, you can only do so if you're prepared to give us your name and community affiliation, or any other affiliation. You don't have to be from the community. So with that, a big welcome to Jennifer, Kazim, and Mike.
Chimigwech Stephen, Ani Bojo, Debajamo Banashis Dijnakas, and Mcdodam, Chikchigan, and Donjaba. I'm Jennifer Ashawasage Pereira, and I'm from Henvey Inlet First Nation, and I work for Atkins Realis as an Indigenous consultation engagement specialist. So welcome to our panel, The Role and Purpose of Consultation. And I know Kazim, you heard him speak earlier, and a lot of people know who Michael Fox is, but I was going to read you their bios. So Kazim is a management consultant and economist. So over the past 15 years, he's worked in strategy, sustainability, environmental and impact assessments, socioeconomic development, and research in diverse industries. Kazim has had the privilege of working with different levels of government, industry, and Indigenous communities across Canada. He has led national, regional development and sustainable initiatives. He has also advised mining companies on sustainability strategy and Indigenous partnerships frameworks. And Kazim is the project lead for MFCAR and the co-lead for NRL. And over to Michael Fox. Michael is from Winisk First Nation and is the president and CEO of Indigenous and Community Engagement, or ICE. He brings a wealth of experience in structuring projects and financing for both industry and Indigenous clients. He's a certified professional facilitator, a certified change management practitioner, and a certified professional Aboriginal economic developer. He is co-chair of the Indigenous Affairs Committee for the Prospectors and Development Association of Canada, or PDAC, and is the co-chair for the jury panel for the Progressive Aboriginal Relations Program, or PAIR, at the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. He also sits on the board for the Indigenous Centre for Cumulative Effects, the Thunder Bay Economic Development Commission, and is a ministerial appointed board member for the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. And Michael is a project lead for WSR and co-leads NRL with Kazim. So I'd like to say welcome to these gentlemen here, and if we can give them a round of applause before we begin. Fantastic. Chimigwech. Martin Falls Community Access Road, Webequay Supply Road, and Northern Road Link are not small undertakings at all, and they require a good amount of consultation. And as you heard this morning, both MFCAR and WSR are and will be circulating their draft environmental assessment and impact assessments. And as for our Northern Road Link, we are into our 4th year, and all 3 projects have undertaken various kinds of consultation activities. And so you heard a little bit about that this morning. You heard from Don Parkinson some of the activities for WSR and some of the activities for Northern Road Link project. And so following our panel discussion, we will have time for questions. And as you heard Stephen say earlier, when you have a question, please state your name and your First Nation or your organization. That would be fantastic for our note takers. So I'm going to start off with the first question. And I would like to understand the importance of consultation. So we're going to start with Kazim and move over to Michael.
Hello. Okay, it's working. Well, thanks so much, Jen, for that question. And it's an opportunity for us to really talk about what consultations meant to the road projects, from my perspective, to the Community Access Road and to the Northern Road Link. You know, as sort of people who are planning these roads, it is impossible. It's impossible to plan these roads in a silo. You know, we're not in the business of drawing lines on a map ultimately, But what we're trying to be in the business of is to convene conversations like this, to ensure that, first of all, the indigenous proponent community, but then all the neighboring indigenous communities that can potentially be impacted by the project have a chance to get together to talk about that potential theoretical line on a map. If it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, what type of potential impacts it can have, people's hopes, aspirations, concerns, fears related to that. That's sort of the conversational process which we call planning. It's sitting together at a coffee table, talking about all of those things. It's having tough conversations in an open forum as well. Getting up and asking a question which might feel like I don't know if I should ask this, but absolutely that's what the term consultation is about for us. It leads us, it drives us, it enables us, it guides us, and eventually creates the decision that this entire process is about in a nutshell. So I think I'll keep it brief with that, Jen.
Okay, and Michael, your thoughts?
Thank you. And I wanted to thank everybody for making time to join us here today and tomorrow, and for the opening remarks and prayers we had this morning. I know Webekwe and Martin Falls in their respective projects, had a set of principles, that they were guiding their undertaking. For Webekwe, they had the three-tier model, which is an approach, a worldview that they held and are adopting around the project. So for them, the whole idea of Section 35 rights is something that they viewed as part of the Crown. And what they wanted to do was to have nation-to-nation, First Nations to First Nations conversations about the project. That was number one for Webekwe. And it's in the terms of reference. If you read the terms of reference, like it's stated in there, that they recognized that their neighbors were all First Nations, that their neighbors had shared history, shared language, shared culture, shared land use, and so that became part of the fundamentals in their approach around consultation. They know that the Crown held it, especially with the federal, they actually lead their own consultation, and they also understood that the province delegates certain procedural aspects of it as Indigenous proponent as well, not just industry proponents, but if you're a proponent of a project like the Wate proposal, the power line that they just built the transmission line, they were the proponent of that infrastructure. And they had to consult their own members, not just the members of the consortium of that First Nations, but other communities that were impacted. So understanding that, from Webekwe, and then later Martin Falls, that a lot of those principles were adapted for the Northern Road Link. So the two communities actually agreed and integrate their own principles for their own projects for the Northern Road Link, in that their preference at first was to have council-to-council meetings, trying to explain why they're doing it, so it's not mediated by some third party, including me, that it was a nation-to-nation discussion, and that this project was important to them. I want to explain to them from a community-to-community level. So.
Chimigwech. So for WSR and MFCAR, we're seeing an end in sight here. And you've heard Cossum say we welcome tough conversations because those are some really good discussions to have there. And Michael mentioned the nation-to-nation discussions that are also incredibly important. So now we're going to take a look at some of the tools we've been using in consultation over the past number of years. So first, once again, Cossum, if you will.
Yeah, so I'll pick up exactly where Michael left it off, which is I think one of the tools which is unique to this project, these projects, is the fact that the First Nations are leading it. So I'm going to talk about it as a tool a little bit because without that, the project doesn't really get enabled. It doesn't really find legs, and consultation we found doesn't happen without this. And that is nation-to-nation conversations, discussions directly between leadership, which potentially help create and facilitate the process that enables us to go into the community to have direct community level conversations. So it's almost like a precursor to be able to go into the community to have alignment between leadership on what the purpose, what the intent of this relationship is, because it's not just about going in and asking, what do you think about this report? It's about that relationship. It's about the development that's going to happen. It's about trying to gain partnership-style consent with the neighboring nations, trying to understand if there's interest in economic development opportunities. That requires that nation-to-nation dialogue, and that's only possible as an Indigenous proponent through the chiefs and councils of the proponent nations meeting with their neighboring First Nations as well. So that's the first one. It's really, I think it's fundamental for us as an Indigenous proponent. Then it's all the relationships that exist inside this room as well. It's an interesting and a strange thing to talk about a relationship as a tool, but that's been an enabler. You know, it's relationships that exist between people sitting in this room. You know, many of us have worked together for over 10 years on different initiatives. Many have worked for decades. So knowing and understanding where people are coming from has been such an enabling thing for the projects as well. Then, apart from that, you know, of course, we realized the unique challenges that we face as a project in the remote north. Now, many communities have Starlink. I think all communities have Starlink, so that access to internet's really changed, which enabled us to gain access to new tools. Like we were doing online streaming and radio programs in the past, but now people have access to online streaming, which is done by the projects to get information out, to collect feedback. We release videos, which are very difficult to access in the past for remote communities. They're more accessible now with the internet. So, you know, those are some examples of the tools that we've used. And of course, that there's no real substitute for a direct conversation. So that's been one thing we've really prioritized, trying to be in the community, trying to request those individual meetings at the community level. And that's taken time, and that time was really sort of spent having those nation-to-nation conversations at the leadership level, trying to ensure that, you know, where the relationships exist, we've got the ability to develop an understanding of what these projects are about. And then going into the communities to have those conversations, benefiting from the precursor processes that I've just talked about. So those have been, I think, some strong and fundamental tools for these projects, which are atypical for many other development projects out there.
All right, Chimigwech. And Michael, what do you think some of the tools, the most effective tools have been in consultation?
I think tools is a good word to use. That's what Webequay Working Group, Gordon and Roy uses, that they view Ontario's environmental impact assessment as a planning tool. They view the impact assessment of the federal government as a planning tool that they're adopting for their purposes. It's a tool for them. And then using their own tools, you know, and their own knowledge in designing that process. So integrating their own Indigenous principles up there, in Webequay's case, the three-tier model. And again, the three-tier model could be seen either on the website, on the project website, or it's in the terms of reference. It's explained briefly there. Actually, it was well written. I think integrated by Steve. Steve Lindley wrote that part in there. Listening, trying to understand that worldview, so it's a planning tool. They view it as grabbing a provincial tool, a federal tool for their own aspirations. At the same time, knowing that they had their own list. If you go to WSR terms of reference, Webequay had their own list of communities that they, based on the shared history, like I said, the shared land use that they had. So that's an example of them exercising their own views, their own determination, their own aspiration around, based on our knowledge and our relationship and people and relations in those communities, from our community or vice versa, that we think these are our list of 8 First Nations. And then the federal government came along and gave their list they have to consult with, and that was 10 First Nations. And the province gave them 22 First Nations. So that's a manifestation of the tools that the communities using their own tools and their own knowledge in a project that they're leading, kind of thing. I think the other important tool is time and money. So people's effort, you know, and we've granted more time in our reviews, you know, for the Indigenous communities, and the Ontario Crown provided the resources for them, for the communities, to participate, mostly in 3 things. One is the review of the terms of reference, participating in the environmental assessment, as well as the Indigenous Knowledge Program. And that was offered right from the beginning, especially at the review of the terms of reference. So these tools, among all the other innovations we'll hopefully have time to talk about, were fundamental in kickstarting this process as an Indigenous-led project.
All right, miigwech. So there's a couple of things there, and I think for myself, one of the important things is allowing for that extra time for reviews. That is so important, because often we're given just a very small time frame and have to scurry and rush to meet those deadlines. And often as First Nations, I can speak for my own community, we have a hard time meeting those sorts of things. And then looking at some of the tools that we use in consultation, there's open houses, there's live streams, there's radio programs, and there's in-community sessions, and of course, there's the website, so we can gather engagement there if someone wants to get a hold of one of these gentlemen with more questions, or they want to direct questions to any of the project teams. So there's that list of tools. And so I wanted to ask you gentlemen, which activity do you find we've had the most engagement on? Qasim?
That's an interesting question, Jen. So I think it's been a function of what stage of the project were we in. Early on in the Community Access Road project, when we were just starting out, we had a significant challenge in trying to get into neighboring communities. And I think one of the reasons was that people had talked about the projects for a long time. It wasn't really clear if they've materialized. And then there was sort of inter-community relations, there was history, there were the way these projects developed. There were other issues that we had to work through as well. So those early days were lean in terms of trying to be able to go into communities and have the time and opportunity to sit with community members. So at that time, just remote communication worked really well. Being able to send e-blasts. So e-blasts is a tool that we use at the Community Access Road, where we send a regular email update on all the activities that are happening. Once we started noticing that was one way of getting information out, which people were picking up on, we started to convert those into videos. So those videos had some really fantastic uptake. So the big ideas, the big things that we were going to investigate, the issues we wanted to talk about, the studies we were conducting, we started to release those videos. So a slightly different approach on our part to get that communication out. So there was a fantastic uptake on that. And then once we moved into a new phase of the project where, the project was consolidated, field studies were ongoing, a lot more activity had taken place, and people in neighboring communities were a lot more aware of the project, we started to see an uptick in open houses. We started to see a significant uptick in demands and requests to come into communities to have conversations at the community level. So it depends on what phase of the project we talk about, but we've definitely seen an evolution as the project has progressed.
Go ahead. Michael?
What was the question?
What's the question? Which activity do you find
yeah.
has had the most engagement?
Well, I mean, there's 22 communities, and you got different constituency within those communities. So you got youth, you have staff, you got chief and council, you have elders, you have land users. So I mean, they're all different methods. Like you have to kind of use everything in the toolbox, and this is an example today and tomorrow. So we started this, a couple years ago with HRE Forum and having, inviting people to come to Thunder Bay and talk about Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests. Not doing IK. What is the role of HRE? What is the role of HRE within the environmental impact assessment and impact assessment? So we had HRE 1, very successful. Then we said, oh, let's do this again. And the province helped the proponents. Okay, we'll support that again because of the uptake. And we did HRE 2. And then we had people show up. Very similar how this is structured. Then we had a 3 projects forum we had last year. And that too was momentum. We had more people show up there. And again, I thank the Ontario Mines for supporting that and being participatory. And this is number 4. This is 3 road projects. We're calling it Gathering and Expo, so this is a tool that's been helpful. You got to remember, pre-COVID, I had less gray hair. Pre-COVID, because I looked at pictures of those, and I was like, oh my God, I turned gray. Pre-COVID, we were going in communities. We were in KI, Casablanca, Wapakika, Wanamin. Like, we were in communities. It's on the record of consultation. And it was getting review. This is pre-tour submission. Getting review on the terms of reference. We were in there, engaging with communities. And then COVID happened. And then we had a pivot. We had to change our ways because they're not allowing a bunch of strangers in the communities when COVID was rapid in the different waves. So chief and council and staff and everybody else pivot. They went online and went old school, right? Teleconference, fax, and I had meetings. I said, well, we'll do that with you. Let's go old school. We'll send you a fax. We'll go through a presentation. Or if you got later on Starlink, they had satellite. We'll do a live streaming with you. We did. We did community information. We did Fort Albany. They had one of those owls, and they had community members all masked up, all section, and we went through the presentation, projected like this, and then they had the table set up, and they actually provided input. We did that in Webequay. We had the laptop, just like this, community hall, and then they would just walk up and talk to me like this. I got a question. They didn't have to do that, but they felt compelled to walk up to the laptop and talk to me, asking questions. So it was done, it can be done, and it worked. Nothing stopped. Of course, everybody wants to be in person, but when COVID was happening, you couldn't do it. But that doesn't mean you couldn't talk to people. We did. We talked to people on the phone. We talked to people on the radio. We pivoted. We started doing radio broadcasting through Wawate radio, and translated a lot of the videos. We did online video tutorials about the different dimensions of the project. That was translated, thanks to Fred from Webequay, helping with those translations. And so these tools, based on the waves and where we were with COVID and post-COVID, now we're going back into communities. So it's a multi-dimensional approach when it comes to, because every community is different, how they want to be engaged. And we take their cue. We give a range of options to engage, share information, consult, if you will, and then it's up to you. How do you want to do it? So they know best how they want to be consulted, so we take their lead. Thank you.
All right, Miigwech. We have so many tools at our fingertips, and I find the website is fairly good and fairly robust. Everything is kept up to date, and there is a tremendous amount of information there. So if there's any other things that anybody would like to know, you can also look at the websites. And I have one last question, and we are running out of time. So the last question is, well, maybe not a question, but let's talk about the 120 days of consultation following the release of the draft environmental assessments, impact assessments. So we heard a little bit about that this morning, and then the length of time, but what are the steps that go into that? And first, I'll pass it over to Costum and then Michael.
Well, the 120 days, that's the time available to communities to review the draft at this stage. Every community will have their own sort of different sense of how they want to review it. They might have community level experts reviewing the draft reports. They might have community leadership, key contact people reviewing the record consultation to ensure that we've captured accurately the conversations we've had with them. They might have external experts reviewing the report for them to give them their sort of independent perspective on what have we put together. And then they have our support in the review process as well. So if they invite us either virtually, we could meet on Zoom, Teams, anything. We could meet in person at the community. We could meet in Thunder Bay, Timmins, Toronto, whatever works, to go over the draft report, to provide sort of an overview of what's in the report. Those summary documents, I find they are fantastic tools as well. Speaking of tools, they're great tools to condense the findings, to distill the findings of a couple of hundred pages into a few summary sheets to say, this is fundamentally what we found. This is the impact that we think the project's going to have on this discipline. This is the way we'll mitigate it. And where we can't mitigate it, this is what the residual would be. And this is how it potentially interacts with cumulative effects. We'll talk about all of those things in those summary reports as well. So that's a great tool. But then ultimately, if the community wants, we're absolutely available to walk through the report, to do presentations at the community level. We're also available after they've done their review to sit with them to talk about the findings and to go through them. So, there's so many different ways in which this can be done. It's sort of driven by the individual First Nation, what process works for them, and we're there to provide A, support, but B, also available to have any style of conversation that they prefer. Remote, summarizing the report, talking about their findings, trying to talk about how will we respond to it, incorporate it into the draft report. So we're available for the full sort of spectrum of what is possible over those 120 days. So I think things are going to be pretty busy between now and June, and then things will sort of the sort of Russian engagement will become quiet for a little bit. But at that time, our teams will be really busy sort of responding to those comments that we've received. So all of those responses will come out to communities, and that will be another opportunity to have a conversation again, that these are the concerns of the communities, and this is how we have sort of reflected on that concern. This is how we've made the change in the report, in the project, and how we expect to work through it and showcasing it in that final report eventually. So that's the process between going from the draft to the final. So it's really a conversation. It's an iterative process. You go from, I think, from strength to strength through those conversations, and hopefully that'll be reflected in the final document.
All right, Miigwech. And Michael, next steps for the release of the draft.
Well, it's exciting. It reminds me of what we've done so far. If you read the terms of reference, what was unique about all the projects was that they wanted 3 different reports along the environmental impact assessment process. So they wanted one when you did the notice of commencement. So what do I mean by reports? Out of the 22 communities, we had to develop a progress report or milestone report on the consultation activities thus far for each of the individual communities. So there'd be 22 reports on progress milestone report 1 after the notice of commencement. Then there was another report, number 2, after the baseline collection. So after the baseline was done, there was another 22 set of reports was sent out, times 2, it was yours as well, looking for feedback on the record of consultation. A third report went out on the evaluation of alternatives and preliminary effects assessment. That went out as well, looking for feedback from the 22 communities. So here we are, after 3 reports, we're now submitting a draft final report on the consultation among all the chapters in the draft report that will be sent out. One other important point, which each of the 2 projects had to do, it had to do with the cumulative effects assessment. So the terms of reference said that we had to do targeted consultations on the cumulative effects chapter, which we did. We did another round. It was basically round 4 or report number 4 kind of thing, targeted consultation efforts. And for us, we did it the way we did it on the radio, on the live streaming, and anybody that wanted to talk to us on the phone, on video, or in person. So that's important because all that is in the draft report. So it wasn't, here's the report, first time looking at it. No, there's been 3 previous report outline our engagement and consultation activities.
All right, Chimigwech. I'm going to open the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, just please put your hand up or stand up, and we have someone with a microphone who will come to you. And please don't forget to state your name and your community and/or organization.
Miigwech, thank you for your presentations. I'm glad to be here with all those people, some new faces and old faces, that's what they usually say. And miigwech ka menego kumamino ga biwa menego ka kanoki tameko e hi and geji mi kana kanyong giban. Kavishi mon hasnionung. The First Nation, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Roy Spence from Webequer First Nation. I'm a trapper, a hunter, and politics, and I've been in politics for the rest of my life. I'm glad to be here, stay around. You know, I was asked to go out and come out to help people, to help out. That was the original teachings from my family and the elders that I work with. So, a few comments here and there, and what I can collect and recall at the time of the Ring of Fire crisis. So we call it the Gimigoshkadin the Mogawik, Higimikogan Sin. At the time of the Ring of Fire crisis in the 2005 and 7, and the discovery happened in August 24, around after 3 p.m. in 2007, with the place, the homelands of the indigenous people, Martin Paul and Webequer. The discovery happened. Everybody was running around, they forget about everything at that time. So anyway, 3 years later, I was listening to an elder from Martin Falls in 2010. All day people interview him, question him, an elder there. I think he was in Gelton. I listened to his stories, and then when they put it on the paper, and if you go out at the office and dig it out, the paper, I think it's in the middle of summer, August or July or September, where he made quite the interesting comments and teachings and statements about who we are as Indigenous people regarding our homelands and everything else in it. And he said that, and he called upon everybody to pause, to think about what will happen in the lands of where the discovery happened, the homelands of his children, his ancestors, and the future generation people. Knowing what will happen, we know what will happen. We know how much activity is going to take place, how much responsibility is going to be taking place, and some control. You talk about the control in the area. How much do we want when we want something from and to give? And he said that he reminded us that we have to think about this for the next 10 years. And it happened exactly what he said. 2020, we've been having meetings back and forth. My chief and counsel at the time, we had a meeting with the government officials and federal officials and the provincial officials. So oftentimes they don't, I'm not to offend anybody, I'm not to offend their law. They can't get it, what we tell them, what we presented for our priorities and issues amongst ourselves. We created our own issues, and seeing that what our children will need for the next 30, 50 years, or 100 years, or the next 5,000 years, yeah. So what they were going to need, what kind of tools, what kind of education they're going to get for themselves to survive, allowing and understanding to follow the natural law. When we talk about the natural law, it's actually the Creator's law. That's why you didn't see any tall buildings in our homelands when the newcomers came, when the settler government came. You didn't see any tall buildings up there. We were given a natural law. Everything in it and contained in our mind and souls and spirit within our people, our women and our men elders. It's important that to incorporate everything in the process. Ndi shigija nan mauch ekichina ke kanata ke give mad zunessen. Give mad zunessen ndi shigija nan Gaunjib mad johange, gashib mad yang our culture, our language, so important to incorporate into the plans of this a big project ahead of us. If that, but it will happen. However, it has to be in the hands of our leadership and people to move forward. We don't want to repeat what the colonial system did to us in terms of their policies and regulations and laws. Everything was down. for us. And we couldn't hardly do much at a time, being those departments, what they call was the Indian Affairs at the time, Ministry of Natural Resources and Social Services, and the police. They did a lot of damage for our nation, still happening today. Those ones we still have quite a bit, 50 or 60 residential survivors, intergenerational impact. The communities up north are in a crisis every single day because we lost our identity and culture and our natural law teachings. We lost everything. How this thing is the mind is going to reconcile. They have to do that now before they go into the ground on the homelands of my brothers and sisters that are sitting with me. They have to understand the government, the top government, is always dictating what we are interested in terms of our priorities, which issues need to be worked on, and it's hurting to our families and people back home when we heard announcement that everything is being dictated now by these governments. So they don't want to sit down with us. They don't want to have a face-to-face meeting. They don't want to go up in the community to visit the communities because they know what they're going to be told. They will be told, you're not going to decide what's going to be our future here anymore. That's what they're going to be told. Whether they're going to be policed or charged or incarcerated now, because this is a mistake what happened to our children and our people before. Even our elders, their sacred bundles were destroyed and taken away. And there's a issue on the table still there. And the priorities to the healthy living is a priority, and it's not happening. So we want to see all these our priorities be addressed and implemented and delivered right to our home. And also respecting our traditional ways of life and doing things out in the land. And it's sad, and every time we go sit down with the government people, bureaucrats, every time we go there, they don't take our words. I talk to my chief and council, my elders all the time, women and youth. So this, for the next 120 days, is only the best interest of the government, not our people. They see this before, they hear this before. It's not our way. When we want to do something for better, to help the people and the future generation, and they know how to do it, they know what to say, what to be putting on the ground. And also the mining, it will have to be a equal and both benefit to the homelands of these families that is going to happen where the mine is going to happen. We all know the Mining Act. We all know the trade law, what it's going to do. We study that. we're only going to get what is left behind, what is left over after the profits. They know that now. We know that. Our money has been mismanaged in Ottawa and even in Ontario. Our Indian monies, we never see it. We could have built our road ourselves. We can have invest our own money. We could have built a mine a long time ago. We couldn't have built roads a long time ago after discovery. The government stay in the total control still. We're not in favor of that. Jimmy, good for your presentation. Very good. You're doing a good job. Be good.
All right. Chimigwech Roy, and also for providing that context and that perspective leading up to why we are here and talking about a little bit about the aspirations for your community. Chimigwech. So I'm going to wrap it up right now and thanking Michael and, oh, you have a question, Don?
Bonjour. Bonjour. My name is Russell Hatchnebenashcom. I'm from Martin Falls, member of council. I'm going to tell a story in my own language. Back in 80s, mid-80s, Chief Eli, former chief, Ogita Zindanaban, and engagement of Seg Martin Falls. Nittam Mikanane Augusto Naban, Skido Road to Nakina. On the shop at Chigion Jimenez non Skido Road, Gongagon Ki Moichigatis non Kagwazigok. Ego Mina tractor train trailer, Ogi Kuchton. El Dabi Joy the Gicho Dabanis tractor materials. Kaigen Abbott down Gagon Abego, Agosagok. Samdesha, Kipekadse, yeah, Moichigan. Mino Shogino was stone near the winter road, Utabana Kamebizoch. Trucks of vehicles, Nuacha, Menose, Kimenose. Sagucha, Nachineta, Abadan, Megocha, Takage, Pebon, Eti, Menose, Abatak. Ego, Mino, Kegonen, Ogina, Tassandan, Chikis, Ego Banen, Mikana, Josh Chagadik, Shkuneganing, Gina Damok, Martin Falls. Ego Ogimon Dona Wanene Giano Kinich Wanena and again a kitch Kikandagon Mitte Wanenda Gentwendagos at Gain a kitch. Paperwork, government work. Mesebugogun Gataso Nadwendagoka. Yet Shabusek. Where's Kajaji on Tashinde, we make Kana Kanamutaman, Kanamutek. Mettege on Knot Chicken, Kinakishkati Meganon. No will be the snow of Gagishik. Yegani Sek. Ake, Camlin, change ka bakana sigapan kon nagat kitchen nagat in the gusno non pepuna mikanan sameni gishok with mother mission in gendran dagok ye mikana jonge menos yat snabik vetigetenang katawach Giniane kodamokka Giniabat stojuare wanen kenimat sort joskadsak Magizagi nata nagaki kanegitchang nogum kongwaman da zimen yemikana magizasa kenisseven Sago joskadsak oginabat stona oganegitchabat stona kenimat sorts nigan Migani nejbak sendeman nogum agishigak China nago kwe mikana kwe China abatak Wagi kita joy de baba kabakananga Chabatak mikana Chwenda kegon nas kagadik Abats down and the come up with the Kegon and go then Wednesday Abachina kegon kamana takus sago chino mosha giete isevinigo yebe matson Misha bangiete and nan kanemota banamino begin get but this is just a story Migach
Ahau, Chimigwech. I see that the food is starting to come out. So perhaps before we wrap up.
Excuse me?
Oh, yes, please.
I got to translate what he said. Yeah, Miigwech Russell. Russell Hatchin-Ibaneshkam is also, as he mentioned, is a counselor for Martin Falls First Nations. And he basically talked about the aspirations of the members, starting with the Chief Eli Munoz when he was chief. He spoke about how he wanted to help the members of Martin Falls lessen the cost of food and stuff like that. And the first road that he tried to do, the first road he made was a snowmobile trail to Nakina to try and alleviate some of these costs. But you can only do so much. You can only bring so much on a snowmobile trail. So his the other means of travel that came into play was the tractor train trailers that used to bring in supplies. They used to have a big tractor with about 3 or 4 sleighs behind them, and that would bring in the housing supplies and stuff like that. But they said that was too slow to get those tractors. It took a while to reach the village. And then they decided to build a winter road. It was better. It was a lot better, faster, but the only problem was that there was only a small window of usage, and it's getting worse all the time. And now the fourth project was this all-season road that's being addressed right now. And but Chief Eli envisioned that along with this road building, that his people would benefit from that, like jobs, whatever comes with it, ownership of things. Most of all, the hauling of equipment and supplies at a lesser cost to the community. And to this day, we're still working on the aspirations of that first day that they wanted to start to alleviate some of the concerns at the community level. He says all season road will be useful for future generations. Maybe not for us older guys. Maybe we might not see that, he says, but the younger generation will benefit. And this is what he would like to see. And he says the supplies will be cheaper. And of course, there's always the negative effects that come with the building of the road to the community, drugs and stuff like that. But he says, but that's to be expected too when North's being opened up. And miigwech.
So the food is coming in. And before we wrap up, I'll ask if there's one more question from the audience. Going once, going twice. I feel like I'm at bingo. 3 times closed. And chimigwech to Michael and Kasim, and chimigwech to all of you for taking the time to spend with us today. And just so you know, Michael and Kasim are here for the rest of the day, as well as our other subject matter experts, and we'll also all be here tomorrow. So tonight, if you think of some questions, bring your questions tomorrow, and we'll try to have those answered. Chimigwech, and I'll pass the floor over to Stephen.
I don't know if that's you or me. Hopefully not me. Thank you to the panel. That was really, really good. Thank you for the questions and the comments from community members, and really helps us think in a good way as we're gathered here and listening to each other. Just a couple of points of housekeeping. I know lunch is out, and I know everybody's hungry. But just to set us up for this afternoon, the way the afternoon is going to work is there's going to be 2 concurrent activities. So community members have signed up to visit different breakout rooms at different times, and the schedule is available. So why don't you have a look? I don't know how many copies of the schedule are available, but there's enough that probably one community member at least could have a copy of the schedule, and maybe you could coordinate with your other community members so you know where you're going to be at a certain time. When you're not in a breakout room, there's going to be the Focus Expo. Tables are set up at the back. And I'll remind everybody again about the passport system. You need 5 stamps, so you have to visit all 5 tables, 1 for each of the roads, 1 for Indigenous Affairs Canada, and 1 for Mines, the Ontario government. And they will stamp your passport. And if you have 5 stamps, you qualify for the draw, which will occur tomorrow at the end of the sessions. And I'll add one more thing to what Jen said. I know sometimes people are a little shy about talking. Find a piece of paper. If you have a question, jot it down and give it to anybody around the room that's part of the project team, and put your name so that we can get back to you with some responses. Or we could read the question out anonymously at a certain point. Okay? I know some people like that format, so just write your question down. You can bring it to me or anybody at the registration desk, and we'll make sure that we get that question out on the floor. Okay, so we're all going to be back. Everything starts at 1. So you're on your own time between now and then. Lunch is at the back. And there will be no formal start. At 1 o'clock, I know for myself, I'm going to be in a breakout room. So I have to be there at 1. So everybody needs to find their way either to the breakout room that they're scheduled to be at 1 o'clock, or to visit the
Expo booths at the back of the room. Enjoy your lunch. Bon appetit.